डॉक्टर बाबासाहेब आंबेडकर ओपन युनिव्हर्सिटी.
Dear learners, I, Dr. Jainisha, Assistant Professor of English at Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, Ahmedabad, welcome you all to the course on Indian Poetics. Friends, by now in the journey of the course, you have gained a background idea of what is Indian Poetics. You also know certain terms such as Rasa, Dwani, Vakrokti, Bharatamuni's Natya Shastra, what constitutes Indian Poetics, and more. Today, in this lecture, we are going to discuss about the relevance of Indian Poetics. Friends, being in academics as students or teachers, the release of the National Education Policy 2020 is very significant, very important for all of us. It advocates the resurrection of Indian ethos in our education system. There is an increasing discussion regarding revival of Indian knowledge systems in our mainstream education. But alongside, there is also a concern among academic circles that Indian poetics, however rich, it was a product of past, a culture, a particular philosophy or view of life, the worldview of an individual or a group, which has almost disappeared from the mainstream. So, in the course of this particular lecture, we will chart the journey of the relevance of Indian poetics by looking at whether Indian poetical tradition is static or dynamic, and how Indian poetics has to be reconfigured to make it more relevant in the present context. Friends, let us begin by understanding Indian in Indian poetics in the 21st century. In India, the tradition of poetics is rooted in the Vedas, the oldest surviving body of literature. For example, Rig Veda talks about the creation of Vak, that is speech, as the basis of all literature. When men of wisdom create verses after winnowing words, men of equal sensibility recognize the meaning. Vedic literature views Kavi, that is poet, as a drashta, the one who is a seer. So the poet who is a seer is the one who discovered in his heart through contemplation the bond between eternal and transitory. Friends, poetics is the theory of poetry. The corresponding Indian term for poetics is Kavya Shastra, that is Shastra, which means theory of Kavya, theory of poetry. However, it is to be remembered that the ancient theorists used the word poetry and Kavya for literature in general. Both poetics and Kavya Shastra, therefore, would mean theory of literature in general. Bharata's Natya Shastra talks about rasa as the essence of aesthetic experience. Later theorists like Bhamaha, Dandin, Vamana, Kuntaka, Anandvardhana, Abhinav Gupta, Kshemendra, Rajshekhara, Mammata, till Pandit Jagannath, etc., all of them talked about meaning and essence of literature through different theories like Dwani, Vakrokti, Alamkar, Riti, Guna, Auchitya schools, and built the whole well-framed corpus of Indian poetics in Sanskrit. Let us move further. Friends, the last millennium saw the rise of Bhasha literatures. What are Bhasha literatures? They are literatures in modern Indian languages. For example, Tamil was branched into Telugu, Kannada, etc., while the Upper Brahmsas became independent languages like Bangla, Oriya, Sindhi, Punjabi, Gujarati, etc. In any case, all bhashas had become literary languages by the end of the 15th century, claims Professor Devi. The emergence of bhasha literatures coincided with invasion of Islamic rulers who brought with them Arabic and Persian. Literary and critical endeavors in all these languages became a part of India. Further, in 19th century, it was witnessed that English education was rising, and it was followed by Indian English literature and Indian English criticism. The second half of the 20th century saw newer discourses, for example, Dalit discourse, feminist discourse, nativist discourse, tribal literature, oral and folk tradition, etc. Thus, in the 21st century, friends, use of the term Indian poetics refers to Sanskrit theories like rasa, dhvani, etc., and ignores all these critical traditions in the different parts of the country. In the opinion of scholar Professor A.K. Singh, he states that the problem lies in the very nomenclature of the term Indian poetics. The term Indian poetics, why it is problematic? For there is, in his words, there is nothing called Indian poetics, as there is no language called Indian. We do not have a language termed Indian. So Sanskrit and Tamil may lay claim to it, but Indian is not a language. Indian is a denominative term having regional, cultural, and political or constitutional connotations. It is stated in his work, Revisiting Literature, Criticism and Aesthetics in India. So friends, the Indian critical tradition or Indian poetics by the end of the 20th century was nothing but a generic term for the conglomerate of poetics or aesthetics of many modern Indian languages, Indian dialects, oral narrative traditions, as well as subaltern discourses. This clarification, friends, is very significant for you as students of Indian poetics to note. Moving further, friends, let us refer to the concept of colonization of Indian psyche, how it all began from the colonization of Indian psyche. Colonial encounter with India, the British colonization, and the resultant ill effects of introduction of English education are well known now. It is noted in the words of William Wilberforce, who was a member of the House of Commons. He is said to have told in his speech in the British Parliament that, I am quoting his words, "We are to enlighten and inform the minds of the subject of our East Indian Empire. By enlightening the minds of the natives, we should root out their errors without provoking their prejudices. The principles of the Hindus are so good, their morals are so pure and better than our own, as we are told by more than one gentleman, that to attempt to communicate to them our religion and our modality is, to say the least, a superfluous, perhaps a mysterious attempt. His words are quoted in A.K. Singh's work, which is titled Discourse of Resistance in the Colonial Period. So colonialism have had many ill effects on Indian culture. Colonialism was thus a cultural project of control, where English education produced several generations of intellectual brains who were totally distant from our own indigenous, ancient Indian knowledge systems. And Indian poetics was one of them. Friends, having this background, let us move further to know the consequences of such cultural imperialism. And the cultural imperialism and its consequences are still reflected in Indian academia even decades after the independence. And we recently celebrated our 75th independence year. So, Professor Kapil Kapoor, he has written a work called Literary Theory, Indian Conceptual Framework. He makes certain observations regarding this concept. And his observations are as follows. He states that the relationship between Indian and Western scholars has been restricted to a one-way receiver-donor relationship. So we were at the receiving part and they were the donors. This receiver-donor relationship, it generated a certain subordination of mind, which is evident in adoption and application of critical theoretical models of the West. Further, the Indian scholar has become an uncritical receiver because he has not been provided access to the alternative modes, alternative indigenous systems of knowledge, thinking and thought, from where he can personally and actively evaluate his role, his critical role in both Indian and Western systems. So, Indian scholars or Indian students have been uncritical receivers of Western ideology, of Western critical theories. Further, Professor Kapoor states that the research taking place in our universities has also been limited. Why it is limited? Because we have been applying Western models of frameworks and Western literary theory to a very particular Indian regional data without thinking much about their applicability and relevance, whether Western models are applicable to Indian landscape or not. These are our major concerns. Moving further, friends, with this backdrop, let us also have a look at Indian poetics as a means of decolonization. Colonization has had ill effects, but how Indian poetics can be a means of decolonization as well. So Professor Singh, in his article which is titled Decolonization in India, he considers decanonization as a means to initiate decolonization. The colonization of Indian psyche had become possible by ruling out the Indian knowledge tradition and replacing it by Western writers and theorists. So how canonization took place? We replaced our Indian critiques, Indian writers, with Western writers and Western theorists. So that was a sort of canonization of literature. You might have noticed that in Indian syllabi, the canonization still remains because our syllabi are still Anglo-centric, not allowing even 15 to 20% space in the English literary departments for the study of Indian authors, Indian culture, Indian critiques, Indian theories, and Indian landscape. Today, when India as a nation is taking huge strides in the global scenario, the course content of literary theory in English would practically find place for Greek critiques like Plato, Aristotle, and Longinus, Roman critiques like Cicero, Horace, English critiques like Sidney, Johnson, Dryden. Students of English literature may relate to all of this because we have witnessed as students of literature that we have studied all these critiques. The Western theorists have occupied a place of eminence. We have studied them thoroughly. But at the same time, we have failed to recognize our own tradition and we have failed to take it at a global level. Thus, my friends, it is the need of the hour that the theorists and poeticians in Indian English and other regional languages should be prescribed. They should find place in our syllabi, in our departments. They should be taught and read because these critiques have been exposed to their own traditions. They have thoroughly learned Indian traditions, and at the same time they have responded to developments in the field of critical and literary theory. For example, let us take Namwar Singh in Hindi, Suresh Joshi in Gujarati, or Bhalchandra Nemade in Marathi. They all have responded to postmodernism in English, but keeping in mind the Indian context as well. So these theorists, these writers are more relevant, are more relatable to Indian psyche. The exclusion of native Indian critical traditions would mean their deliberate rejection without even examining them, and that would be an unjust activity. It would also mean deeming Indian critical tradition as static and frozen. So friends, the question now arises, is Indian poetics really a frozen tradition? Let us seek answers to it. Friends, Indian critical tradition is a continuous and cumulative tradition of generations of thinkers, texts, and conceptual structures in different areas of human thought. For example, Pandit Bhagwat Shastri uses the metaphor of Ganga for it. The Indian critical tradition flows like the sacred river Ganga. How Ganga flows, where after its origin, many tributaries join on its way. They get merged into the river Ganga. The river, if there comes a mountain or any other intervention in its way, it does not stop. It goes ahead, merging that deflection. Some distributaries go out of it as branches, and that may appear as the re-emergence. So this entire process of submergence into the river Ganga of some tributaries, and after that re-emergence of some other tributaries, it goes on continuously without harming the main flow of the river Ganga. Similarly, apply this whole metaphor to Indian poetics. In this way, an oral tradition based culture like India, it has certain inbuilt mechanisms for the recovery of knowledge. Further, scholar Kapil Kapoor, Professor Kapoor, mentions some renewal mechanisms that keep the Indian poetical tradition alive even today. How River Ganga is renewed every time. Similarly, Indian poetical tradition is also renewed. How? Through commentary, through translation, through adaptations, popular expositions, recreation, etc. Friends, commentary is a bhashya on original knowledge texts. For examples, Patanjali's Mahabhashya, Sankaracharya's Bhashyas on Upanishads. These are critical commentaries which make us understand the Sanskrit Prakrit texts. They ensure the availability of the text as well as the ability to understand it and the contemporary relevance of the text. Further, for example, in the 20th century, Sri Aurobindo, he has written commentaries on Vedas and Upanishads, those Vedas and Upanishads which in their original form are difficult for us to interpret. We can refer to Sri Aurobindo's commentaries. The second renewal mechanism is translation. All major classical poetical texts, scriptures, these were translated in the 20th century into English and many Indian languages. Popular exposition, friends, it is reaching the texts through katha and pravachans, through stories, to make them relatable to the masses. Further, adaptation is also a mechanism. It means changing the mode of presentation of a text. For example, creating a series based on Mahabharata or Ramayana. Recreation would mean taking the text as a source and creating a new work out of it to make it more relatable to the masses. For example, many of Bhasha's plays were based on the epic Mahabharata. So you have the gist of Mahabharata, it is recreated in the version of drama. Further, friends, let us move to rethinking poetics in India in the present context. While thinking of poetics in India in the present context, 2 points are significant. First, to understand the holistic picture of poetics in India today. That is, Indian poetics is not just a body of ancient theories of past, but Indian poetics is a dynamic tradition that has branched into the tributaries of modern Indian languages, including the global language English. Thus, a true student of Indian poetics has a multifold responsibility. What responsibility? Responsibility of becoming aware of the diverse, fertile minds in various Indian critical traditions. We have witnessed scholars in Indian tradition. For example, Ramchandra Shukla, Hazari Prasad Dwivedi, Ramvilas Sharma in Hindi literature, Uma Shankar Joshi, Suresh Joshi, Anand Shankar Dhruv, R.V. Pathak, Sitanshu Yashash Chandra in Gujarati literature, B.S. Mardekar and Nemade in Marathi, Tagore, Shankho Ghosh, etc. in Bengali, Hiriyanna, Ananda Kumar Swami, K. Krishnamurthy, Sri Aurobindo, Rabindranath Tagore, Krishna Rayan, etc. These scholars have deeply studied Western models. They have deeply studied European, American poetics, along with deep study of native poetical tradition. And these scholars have tried to locate their relevance in the Indian context. Second most important point, friends, there is a considerable absence of dialogue found in Indian academia between the Western poetics and classical Sanskrit poetics and the poetical traditions of modern Indian languages like Gujarati, Hindi, Bengali, Marathi, etc. As a result, to curb that, a comparative, critical, theoretical approach to studying poetics in India is the need of the day. Friends, hence it can be concluded that a mature attempt to compare poetical theories in India with those in European, American, Arabic, Persian, Chinese or Japanese traditions can certainly open new avenues for us. These traditions can be placed side by side. Their thematic concerns can be compared. Genealogy, historiography, influence upon each other, mutual reception can also be considered. Now a question may arise that how all this can be done. So I would suggest a few examples of this, that as students of Indian poetics, you may indulge in comparing the Alamkar tradition with Sanskrit in Sanskrit and Tamil poetics, comparative study of the theory of Vakrokti and Russian formalism, comparative study of Riti and stylistics, comparing Horace's principle of decorum with Kshemendra's Auchitya, and many more. The list can go on. Also, besides this, the subaltern discourses in different Indian languages can also be studied. A comparative study can be undertaken under the ambit of Indian poetics. For example, how is feminism in Gujarati different from that of feminism in Tamil and Malayalam literature? Or how is the Dalit discourse in Marathi different from Telugu in terms of the issues it addresses? Friends, if these issues of the day are addressed by the study of Indian poetics, its relevance will certainly multiply in the 21st century. So, learners, with this, I wish you take a little exercise and try to explore newer areas in arts and literature, dance, drama, where the theories of Indian poetics can be applied to reach to newer interpretations. With this backdrop, we can conclude, we can say that poetics, Indian poetics, is not a frozen tradition, but it is that rich heritage, a tradition which is ever flowing, constant, continuous, ever flowing, and dynamic poetic tradition. With this, dear learners, I thank you all for watching this video and wish you a very happy learning in the course of Indian poetics. Thank you.
स्वाध्यायः